Islam Makhachev is widely regarded as one of the most well-rounded mixed martial artists in the UFC, and perhaps one of the most well-rounded fighters of all time. Makhachev can do it all. He has some of the most effective grappling we have ever seen in the UFC. His takedowns range from traditional single legs and double legs to judo throws and trips. He is also one of the few fighters who effectively makes the tie clinch a major part of his striking game. And on top of that, he's got decent hands and has gone toe-to-toe with elite MMA boxers. Makhachev has submitted great BJJ players and KO'd some of the best strikers this sport has ever seen. So it's really no wonder why he is such a large favorite going into his fight against Jack Della Maddalena at UFC 322, in spite of the 15-pound weight jump between lightweight and welterweight. But what if I were to tell you that there is one part of the MMA game that Islam Makhachev doesn't deal well with? One thing Islam is lacking that can easily be overlooked if you're watching his fights without looking for it. But once you see it, you just can't ignore it. And if you want to know what it is, just watch until the end of this video to find out. Nah, just kidding, I'll tell you right now. Islam Makhachev just doesn't throw or defend leg kicks. That's it. Now, if you don't believe me, go and look at the striking totals for Islam's fights with Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, and the first Volkanovski fight. 0 leg strikes thrown in the Charles Oliveira fight. 1 leg strike thrown and 0 landed during the Dustin Poirier fight. 3 leg strikes thrown and landed during the first Volkanovski fight. And remember, the Poirier and Volkanovski fights went on for 5 rounds. I mean, I've gone back and watched a ton of Islam Makhachev's fights, and I might be wrong when I say this, but I don't think he has thrown a single calf kick throughout his entire UFC career. And as far as I'm aware, he has not checked a single kick either. Now, you might think that this is not a big deal, and so far it hasn't been. However, if I'm Jack Della Maddalena and his team, I'm seeing this tendency and building at least part of his game plan around it. Because, as I'll explain later, there is a way that Jack Della could fight this fight that could really badly expose this weakness. So in this video, we are going to be examining Islam Makhachev's lack of both an offensive and defensive low-kicking game, how that may compromise his striking against Jack Della, and the 3 strikes that JDM should absolutely incorporate as part of his fight against Makhachev. Also, as a bonus, I'll be bringing up a way that Islam could punish JDM for his striking tendencies towards the end of this video, and then giving my prediction for how this fight will go. So without further ado, let's get into the breakdown. When it comes to Islam's lack of a low-kicking game, the best fight that demonstrates this is the first Volkanovski fight. Throughout the fight, Volk landed 12 low kicks, and these low kicks weren't tippy-tappy low kicks, as Lucas Tracy may say. These were solid shots that, when they landed, did clear damage to Makhachev's lead leg. After rewatching this fight, there were 2 kicks that Volkanovski used to great success against Islam. The inside low kick with the right leg from orthodox, and the outside low kick with the left leg from southpaw. Since these kicks are thrown with the rear leg from their respective stances, they are much more powerful than a kick thrown from the lead leg. Just to get started with the inside low kick because it's simpler to understand, here we can see Volkanovski throwing the kick, catching Makhachev right behind the knee, and buckling him for an instant. Volkanovski lands the same kick a bit later in the fight, albeit this time he lands with the toes, doing less damage. However, the outside low kick from southpaw is the one I really want to talk about, because there's a really particular way that Volkanovski was throwing that strike in that fight. Now, if you go back and watch the first fight between Volkanovski and Makhachev, you will see that Volkanovski was constantly switching from southpaw to orthodox and from orthodox to southpaw. Volk was doing this despite the fact that he is much more effective from orthodox, as his orthodox jab is one of his most potent weapons. Volkanovski was switching stances constantly for 2 reasons. First, he was doing this to keep Islam from shooting easily. Switching stances changes the takedown entries that are available to a wrestler. And second, he was switching stances mid-combination to land strikes, including the outside low kick from southpaw. Here are a few instances of this happening during the fight. Here, you can see Volkanovski leading with the right hand to the body, which, spoiler alert, is going to be important later on, and Volk lets his rear leg leave the mat, which then sets him up to land the kick. This one doesn't land clean, but you can see the setup, right? Similarly here, you can see Volk lunging in with the right hand, throwing the left overhand, and then finishing with an outside low kick from southpaw. Same here, right hand from orthodox, then left hand, and then kick. Volkanovski also threw a few of these kicks straight from a southpaw stance. Now, did Volkanovski really compromise Islam with these kicks? No, not really. But was Islam defending them? No. And that's where a striker like Jack Della Maddalena could carve out an advantage. Now during this fight with Volk, Islam threw 3 low kicks, all of which were inside low kicks with his left leg. And yes, he landed them, but they were tippy-tappy kicks. You know, the kind that you use to find range, or as we'll get into next, the kind you use to set up body and head kicks. Islam Makhachev is no slouch when it comes to body and high kicks. This was most evident in his rematch with Volkanovski, where he hammered Volk's body with kicks, which eventually set up the high kick that finished the fight. However, in that short notice rematch, Volkanovski made a critical mistake. He fought the entire fight out of orthodox. In an orthodox versus southpaw matchup, the body and head kick with the rear leg become potent weapons because that side of the body is open to those power strikes. This is why most of the prominent head kick KOs in UFC history are in orthodox versus southpaw matchups. In addition to Makhachev versus Volk in their rematch, there's Leon Edwards' KO over Kamaru Usman, Justin Gaethje's KO against Dustin Poirier, and most recently, Quillan Salkild's KO of Nasrat Haqparast. Now, Islam Makhachev has this great body and head kick. But what happens if the fighter he is facing is a southpaw? And with that in mind, we can now look at the Dustin Poirier fight. And just by looking at the stats, you can already see a pattern emerging. In the Poirier fight, which went 5 rounds, Islam threw and landed a total of 7 strikes to the body. In contrast, in his fights with Volkanovski, Islam threw 20 strikes to the body in the first fight and 11 in the rematch. So Islam threw more body strikes in a single round against Volk than he did against Poirier over 5 rounds. And why is that? It's simple. When you are in a closed stance, so orthodox versus orthodox or southpaw versus southpaw, it is much harder to effectively land a body kick with the rear leg. This is because there is much less room for the kick to land on the body. You are more likely to land the kick on your opponent's back, elbow, or hip, which could lead to you damaging your own leg. The rear leg head kick in closed stance is also easier to block due to the presence of the lead shoulder. Instead, in a closed stance matchup, you are much better off throwing the outside low kick. A strike that, as we covered earlier, is something that Islam Makhachev does not throw. Now, in the Dustin Poirier fight, Islam Makhachev threw 1 body kick with his rear leg, and it was more of a teep kick than the typical roundhouse kick he throws. Besides that teep, and this 1 right hook to the body I saw him throw, the significant body strikes that Islam Makhachev landed on Poirier were all knees to the body in the clinch. Islam doesn't jab to the body. He doesn't throw straight lefts to the body. And he doesn't throw calf kicks to Dustin's lead leg despite Dustin being a boxer with a bladed stance, which is basically like saying, please low kick me. All of my weight is on my lead leg. Please kick it. Instead, when Islam Makhachev fought Dustin, when striking at range, he was almost exclusively headhunting with a jab, a straight left, and his lead hook. And as a result, the fight was far more competitive than it should have been. Now, you might be thinking, what about Dustin's calf and low kicks? Why didn't he throw more of them? And to answer your question, yes, Dustin did throw calf kicks, but he was throwing them completely naked at the beginning of the fight. No feints, no setups, and anybody with eyes can avoid those. In one instance, Islam caught one of the kicks and took Dustin down, after which Poirier stopped throwing them. And that is definitely a concern when throwing kicks against a wrestler as good as Islam. However, As we saw in the Volkanovski fight, if you are properly setting up kicks with feints and combinations, they will land, and Islam won't defend them. So if you are fighting Islam Makhachev out of a southpaw stance, you can limit his range striking skill set to a jab, a cross, and a right hook, all of which will be heading for your head. Makhachev doesn't throw switch or snap kicks to the body with the lead leg. He doesn't throw jabs and straights to the body, and he doesn't throw calf or thigh kicks. So in other words, if you fight Islam Makhachev as a southpaw, you can limit his striking to being basically a competent MMA boxer. Definitely still good, but not truly elite, which I think really helps to explain the success that Volkanovski and Dustin Poirier had in their fights with Makhachev. Also, while this isn't really relevant to the current Islam Makhachev, don't forget that Adriano Martins was a southpaw as well. And now, based on this information, let's talk about how JDM could effectively game plan to beat Islam. The 3 strikes Jack Della Maddalena should prioritize throwing in his fight with Islam Makhachev are the outside calf kick to Makhachev's lead leg, the body jab, and the body straight. The calf kick should be Jack's main offensive tool during the early parts of the fight due to its range, how difficult it is to catch, and the cumulative impact it can have later on. And as I showed earlier, this strike will land clean if JDM commits to it. Now, as for the body jab and body straight, these attacks aren't just strikes that JDM tends to throw because he's a great body puncher. No, these will help to keep Jack safe from Islam's takedowns. Jack Slack produced a great video on this, but body jabs and body straights are some of the most potent counter wrestling tools a striker can have. When throwing a straight punch to the body with correct form, you naturally lower your stance. This makes defending a takedown much easier, as your other arm is naturally going to be lower than your opponent, letting you get an underhook. If your opponent is shooting under a body punch, they will have to shoot incredibly low, giving you more time to react and sprawl. So with these tools, we can start to build a game plan for Jack Della Maddalena to win this fight. First, if I'm JDM, I'm fighting 80% of this fight out of southpaw. This is to limit Islam's striking arsenal. However, while at range, I would switch stances to keep Islam from getting an easy setup for the single leg. From southpaw, I would be throwing the outside calf kick and throwing them hard, like really hard. And from orthodox, I would throw the inside low kick to the thigh. And yes, before you ask, as we saw in the Bilal Muhammad fight, JDM throws leg kicks from both stances. In order to set up these kicks, I would be pressuring with straight punches to the body, which would serve 3 purposes. First, disguise the low kicks. Second, prevent the takedown. And third, reduce Islam's gas tank. Doing attritional damage with body punches and leg kicks would help JDM pressure Islam Makhachev back to the fence, from where he could unleash combinations up top to catch Islam on the chin. But yes, that is the outline of a game plan that Jack Della Maddalena could implement with his current skill set. JDM is a great striker out of both stances, and if he is able to force Islam into a boxing match, where, mind you, JDM would also have the kicking advantage due to being in close stance, he will win the fight. However, there is a way that Islam could punish JDM on the feet, and that is with his tie clinch. Jack tends to duck his head quite low when slipping punches, something that Bilal Muhammad failed to capitalize on. But Islam could do it with his knees. If Islam could catch JDM bobbing too low, that could present an opportunity to grab a collar tie and land a devastating knee, basically finishing the fight right there. And now, as for my prediction for the fight, here it is. My prediction for this fight is Jack Della Maddalena by decision. Now, of course, you probably expected that since I've made this entire video on the holes in Makhachev's game that Jack could exploit. However, unlike Victor MMA who rage-baited you by saying this fight won't be close, I'm with everybody else. This is a very 50-50 fight. And I believe that this fight will come down to one word: damage. Now, of course, JDM could get submitted very early on by Makhachev, but I find that unlikely when considering how much grappling he must be drilling with Craig Jones and Volkanovski. We also can't forget that many people were predicting an early and easy finish for Makhachev in his first fight with Volkanovski and his fight with Poirier. And well, those two gave Makhachev a hell of a fight. The times when Islam Makhachev has finished an opponent with complete ease during his championship reign have been a flabby borderline alcoholic Volkanovski on short notice, and Renato Moicano, a guy fighting Islam on literally a day's notice, who by no means should have been getting that title shot. Jack Della will be going into this fight with a full camp, so I highly doubt he gets finished early. However, he could get taken down and controlled, and in fact, I fully expect that to happen. However, Islam isn't the savage ground and pound threat that Khabib was. He prioritizes control and submission over damage, and that is where I think Jack Della will edge Makhachev out. I believe JDM will land more significant strikes and harder significant strikes throughout the rounds, and probably drop Makhachev at 1 or 2 points in the fight. And as a result, I think JDM will win a damage-based decision. The decision will lead to some controversy where certain individuals, Daniel Cormier, will argue in favor of Makhachev based on him getting more takedowns and control time. But the damage will be very clearly in favor of the Aussie. In some ways, I expect this will mirror the first fight that Volk had with Islam. The champion from the higher weight class will win, but the challenger won't lose any stock from the loss. So yes, that's the video. Goodbye.